Hello students, and welcome to Lab 4 for MM101, and today we will be starting off with a very interesting topic on 3D drawing. So for the past 3 weeks, all the drawings which we have been doing, as well as the commands or the functions we have been learning, have all been related to 2D drawings. So as you can see on your model screen, you have a x-axis which is horizontal and a y-axis which is vertical. So all the drawings or all the objects which you have created in AutoCAD so far have been on the XY plane. So just like in order to draw a cylinder, so first you start off with a circle, and for a circle you give it a depth. So depth would be equal to the height of the cylinder. So in other words, the cross-section area for a cylinder is a circle. So if I were to draw a cylinder in AutoCAD in 3D, so what I will do is I'll draw that particular circle in the XY plane, and then I will give it a depth. So this part here, giving it a depth, the term is called extrusion or extrude. So it's like push and pull. So from a circle you are pushing or pulling out to get your cylinder. So in other words, that push of pull is referred to as extrude. So you draw a circle of a defined diameter in the XY plane, and you extrude. In AutoCAD you extrude along or parallel to the Z axis. Okay, so if you keep this sentence or keep this phrase in mind, that you draw your 2D object in the XY plane, and to get that or to modify that 2D object into a 3D object, you extrude along the Z-axis or parallel to the Z-axis. So you will never run into, or you'll hardly run into any problems if you need to draw 3D in AutoCAD. So some of the coverage for today's class is we will first learn how to set our view into 3D. So right now we are in a 2D view, so we will convert our view into 3D, and then we'll be using UCS, which is the user defined or the user coordinate system. So in 3D we need to move or work with our UCS a lot, so you'll be learning that as well. And moving on, so there are many ways to orient or change the orientation of your UCS, as well as you will cover. Okay, so you can do your own reading and learn about how you draw points in a 3D space. So and also we'll come across polyline. So polyline, as you can see, is just to the right of the line command or the line button. And what a polyline, poly means many, so polyline has many lines which are joined together. So if you create an object using polylines, you'll end up with a 2D solid, and then you extrude the 2D solid to get a 3D solid. So, and the difference is, if you draw a object using lines, AutoCAD will treat it as lines, and then yes, you cover extrude, how to extrude it. So it's very, very simple. And then there are many ways to extrude, such as extrude based on the direction, extrude based on a given path, and extrude based on the taper angle. Okay, and then extrude based on expression. So these are some of the things you can go through the lab manual and find it out for yourselves. And then comes the main objective for today's exercise, which is how to edit the solid. Once you have created solids, how to, if you have multiple solids multiple 3D solids object, that is, so how do you union them, how to subtract solids, and how to intersect those solids. And then finally we'll cover orbit and visual styles. So to start off with, okay, so this will be a short video and a short class, and the rest of the, so I'll just cover the main topics. So to start off now, as you can see, we are in a 2D plane. So to convert into a 3D view, so in a 3D view you will have, so you go to view on the menu bar and you look for 3D views. Okay, and then you look for southwest isometric. Click on that in order to change your view into a 3D view. Now you can see 3 planes, which is the XY plane. So your grid will always be parallel to the XY plane, the grid on AutoCAD. You can turn that off and on. Okay, so you can leave it on for in aiding to draw objects. And you also have the XZ plane and you have the YZ plane. So a shortcut way of changing your views is, so by default, once you in the 2D view, you'll get this. You are always given the top view to draw your drawings in a 2D plane. So you can just click here and then change it to southwest isometric. So now we have a 3D view. So simply speaking, so you're putting your 2D drawings on the floor and then you're extruding your drawings upwards along the Z-axis. Okay, now you can also have the option, now this is optional, you can also change your dashboard to pretty much reflect your 3D commands or 3D shortcuts. So if you go to the gear icon at the bottom where the status bar is, and then you can change from drafting and annotation to 3D basics. So you will see that your dashboard changes, and here you are able to see those quickly, get access to those functions such as push, such as extrude, okay, and directly it can create objects for you. Okay, so let's see the difference if I draw an object in 2 dimension using lines and then polyline. So I'll just compare by drawing a square. So here I'm drawing a square using lines. So I am ensuring that I'm drawing in the XY plane. So that is a square which I have drawn using lines. So if I move the mouse over it, it says that, provides me that information that I have drawn 4 lines. So AutoCAD treats it as 4 different lines just joined together. And here I have, using the polyline function, to draw the same square for the same dimension. So on the right, just now I have drawn, so as you can see, if I just move the mouse over that square which I have drawn using polyline, it says it as a polyline. So you see the difference. So if I select the square drawn using polylines, that entire, so this is a 2D object on the right, and on the left is just 4 lines. It is 2 dimension, but it is just taught. So you could imagine this to be hollow. So you just have 4 lines. So it's like a fence, and it's empty space in between those 4 lines, or the area. And here you have a solid object. Now let's try to extrude this too and see the difference for ourselves. So you can just click on extrude, and then it will ask for you to select objects to extrude, or you can then click on mode, and then the other methods of extrusion you can play around with. So here I can select mode and press enter. So you see, so this, now I am giving it depth. Now you can see the difference for yourself. So I'll end up drawing a cube on the right. So this is a 3-dimension solid. Okay, it says here 3D solid. And on the square which I made using lines, if I move, so those, what I have created is 4 surfaces which I have made. So this is a surface, it's a surface, all 4 sides. It's like I've created walls, and if I just go and change my visual style, so just to the right of the views, you can change to any visual style, so maybe shaded. And if I try to orbit this, okay, orbit means to view from a different angle. So as you can see, on the right I have a 3D solid, it's a solid object, and on the left I have just 4 surfaces. So, and inside there is empty space. So this is, on the right, that is not considered to be a 3-dimension solid, it's just 4 surfaces. Okay. Now if you'd like to quickly go back to your default southwest isometric view, so you can, on the right hand side, you can just click on this home button. So it will go back to your default view, and most of the time while drawing in 3D, you would like to your visual style to be in 2D wireframe, so that's easy to select objects and edit them and modify them. Okay, so just wanted to show you the difference. So have that habit of drawing 2D objects in the XY plane using polyline function rather than the line function, because as you can see, it's just create surfaces. So you can remember this, that if you extrude a line, you get a surface, you get a 2-dimension surface, and if you extrude a 2-dimension surface, you get a 3D solid. Okay, so you have no need for these surfaces, so I'll delete them. Okay, so now as you can see, what if you had drawn lines and if you'd like to change it into polylines? So there is something known as Pedit. So we are going to join the 4 lines and convert it into polyline. So start the Pedit command. Pedit means polyline edit. Type it in the command box, and then it says select polyline or multiple. So these are just 4 lines, so we'll click on multiple because we'd like to make multiple selections. And then it says select objects. So select those 4 objects. After you've done so, press enter, and then it says convert the lines, arcs and splines to polylines. Yes. And which option are we going? So we are going to join them. So you click on join and you leave this to 0. Just press enter, and after that the command cycles back again to that option, so you can just escape from this. So now you will see that the 4 lines we had, it is a polyline now. So we have converted our lines into polyline. So you can extrude this as well. Okay. So now I have converted firstly lines into polylines and then extruded it to get a 3D solid. So I have a 3D solid in both cases. So again, just reminding that in order to get a 3D solid, if you are drawing a 2D object, make sure you're drawing the 2D object using polylines. Okay, so now I would, let's say I would like to add a cylinder. Okay, so you can just easily look for the cylinder command. That's one way to do it. So maybe in one of the corners. Okay, and then it says specify radius, so I can give it any radius. And then you need to extrude it. It says specify the height. So by default the height is 50. Or I could just use the object snap function to click. So I have now 2 objects which are overlapping each other. Okay, now if I show you the 3D view of it, so that's what it looks like. So I have a cube intersecting or overlapping with a cylinder. And also I can, if I'm using this circle command, so I'll just draw the cross section first and give it a radius and then extrude that shape, and from a circle I can get a cylinder. So you see, there are many ways to get the same thing done. So for this shape, let's see what union does. So if I start with the union function, so click on union, it says that it combines the 3D solids or 2D regions by addition, right? So it unites them. But you have to make sure that solids which you have, they are in contact with each other. Either they are in contact with each other, or they are overlapping each other, okay, or they are intersecting with each other. So first I'll click the union command, and simply it says select objects. So you select the object or the number of objects which you'd like to union. So, and then just simply press enter. So now you see the difference on the right. So I am able to see two different objects, but the ones which I have just put under the union command, it is a single 3D solid now. So there you go. Right, that's a single 3D solid, and those are two different solids. So that's union. So it makes multiple solids into a single 3D solid entity. Okay. So maybe I'll just make another copy of this to show you examples of intersect and subtract. So again, I have two solids on the same one. I'd like to maybe subtract the cylinder from the cube. Okay, so subtract is a two-step process. First, you decide which solid you'd like to subtract from which one. So in this case, I would like to subtract the cylinder from the cube. So once I execute the subtract command, so it will say select object. So here you select the object which you would like to subtract from. So I would like to subtract the cylinder from the cube. So I will select the cube first, and then as you can see, so select the solid surface and the region to subtract from. So I have selected the cube. I'll press enter, and then it will say select the solid to subtract. So I'd like to subtract the cylinder. I'll click that. So as you can see, so the overlapping part of those two drawings, so the two 3D solids, that part will be subtracted. So that's how the subtract command works. Okay. So there you have it. So that's union on the left, and in the center you have subtract. Okay, moving on to the last one. Let's look at intersecting objects. So what intersecting does is that if you have overlapping regions or solids or regions, it puts that as the resultant, whereas the rest is deleted, right? So here you can see that there's only a quarter of a cylinder which is overlapping onto the cube. So start of the intersect command. So it's very easy. So select the entire solid for the drawing itself, and then press enter. So you see the overlapping region, that is the remainder, while the rest is deleted. So once you are intersecting, what's the common object between the the cube and the cylinder? So it was the portion here which was overlapping. So that's your. So the same solid, the first one is union, the second one is subtract, and the third one is intersect. And you can see the difference for yourself. Now let's say, so in this short example, I have pretty much covered how to change your visual styles. Okay, so you by default we keep it to 2D wireframes, and then you can have a host of selections. Which one makes it easier for you to view your drawing, so your 3D objects. And we have also covered how to orbit our drawing. So here you can look at orbit. Then there are multiple ways to orbit your drawing. You have free orbit and you have continuous orbit. So that's all about orbit. And then I will touch a bit on UCS as the last coverage for today. So when it comes to UCS, as I said earlier, that you draw your 2D solid along the XY plane or parallel to the XY plane, and you extrude in the Z direction. So let's say, for example, the surface I see here, okay, I would like to draw a horizontal cylinder and then subtract that horizontal cylinder from the cube. So I'd like to have a cylinder going all the way across, right, or a hollow cutout. So what I will do is I can draw a line here, and from the midpoint of that line I can draw a circle. Okay, as you can see, by default that circle is being drawn in the XY plane, but I want that circle to not be horizontal but be vertical. Okay, so what I will do is I'll type in UCS to change the orientation of my UCS. Then I have multiple options. So it says specify the origin of UCS, or you can go with these options: face, named object, previous view, world, X, Y, Z, or the Z axis. So what the face option does, if you select that and if you click on whatever face, that face becomes the XY plane, or whichever face you click on, it becomes the XY plane. And then you have named object, previous. So you can go through your notes and then explore these other options for changing your UCS. So by default it's the world UCS, okay, where it is restricted. The XY is restricted, the XZ plane and the YZ plane is restricted. So if I click on face, so I'd like to make that face, which is on the left hand side, as my XY plane. So I'll just click on that and press enter. So now you can see that I find this really easy to orient my UCS. So whichever plane I'd like to draw it, I just use the face option to make that face my XY, parallel to the XY plane. So now if I draw a circle which is centered about the diagonal, as you can see, okay, that's too big. So it says specify a radius of the circle. Okay, so now I can extrude that circle all the way to the other end of the cube. Okay, so maybe I'll just change the visual style to show you. So I have here one solid, which is that, and the second solid is the cylinder. Okay, so I'd like to subtract that cylinder from the first solid. So what I will do is look for my subtract function and then select the object. So remember, your first, when you're using the subtract command, it's a two-step process. The first step is to select the solid which you'd like to subtract the object from. So you'd like to subtract the cylinder from the solid, which is the cube. So select that and then press enter. And the second part is to select the object you'd like to subtract. So you want to subtract the cylinder, so click on that and there you go. So you have a full cylinder. Okay, alright. Now let's say I would like to draw a vertical cylinder which is centered about the cube in this object. So here I have my 3D solid. What I will do is at the moment you can see that my XY plane is on the side. So I'll change my UCS so that, or I'll change the orientation of the UCS so that the top face changes or becomes my XY plane. So here I will type in UCS in the command window and I can easily look for the face option. So the top face now becomes my XY plane. So which will allow me then to make a or create a vertical cylinder. I'm going to draw a circle here. So I will give it a radius 10 and then extrude that circle to form a cylinder. So if I change the visual style, you'll see that I have a cylinder here within the 3D solid object. So what I can do is go to the reason I always switch back to the 2D wireframe view, because it allows for easy selection, which would become a bit more cumbersome if you are working in any other view. So to subtract, remember it's a two-part process. So first I'll select the object from which I'd like to subtract the cylinder, which is this solid. Press enter and then select the cylinder, which is what I'd like to subtract. Within this 3D solid, it's a single entity, so it's one single 3D object. So I have a horizontal cylinder which I have removed from the cube portion, and also I have a vertical cylinder. So in order to draw the two cylinders respectively, the horizontal cylinder, I made sure that this particular face was my UCS, parallel to the XY plane, sorry. And just as I showed you a while ago, in the XY plane here is parallel to the top surface, so where I draw my 2D object and then I extrude that along the Z-axis. And with that we complete the lab 4 coverage. So I will still encourage you to go ahead, because I have just touched briefly on each of the commands or the functions in 3-dimension drawing, so which is to change your UCS and to change your view to a 3D, and to change the menu bar to reflect the 3D icons, much easier to access. And the major ones were modifying your solid, that is to union, subtract, as well as intersect. So I hope you would find this video useful, and stay safe until the next class. Thank you.